vecino, have you ever woken up and felt like there were two different people living inside of you? Así me pasó unos años atrás. I woke up to the realization that there were two different versions of myself. There was the John that I took to work or to school, and then there was the version of me that I was at home. Y por mucho tiempo, I thought that that was just what it meant to be bicultural. In my mind, I had to keep these two versions of myself separate. I didn't know that I could let them be in the same room together at the same time. And it took me a long time to realize the exhaustion that I was feeling wasn't from living between two worlds. It was from never letting those two worlds actually meet. A ver, vecino, let's sit down for this one and grab your cafecito while you're at it. Welcome to episode 12 of the Entre Mundos podcast. This is a space for bicultural Latinos navigating life between cultures. Y aquí hablamos de cultura, identidad, mental health, family expectations, and what it means to honor your roots without losing yourself. For those of you that are new here, I'm John Eli, your bicultural vecino who understands cultura y psychology. Off the mic, I work as a trauma-informed counselor, but more importantly, I'm someone who has lived in this in-between space his whole life. This podcast is my way of putting to language what a lot of us carry but don't always know how to say. Now, before we get deeper into today's conversation, I want to offer this quick reminder. This podcast is not therapy and it's not a replacement for therapy. This space is for reflection and conversation. Mejor, think of it as a plática con tu vecino favorito. All right, ahora sí, let's talk. Okay, before we get to today's conversation, I just want to take a moment to reflect on something. This is episode 12. This is the season 1 finale. Y mira, whenever I started this podcast, I wasn't sure what it was going to become. I just knew that there were conversations that bicultural Latinos needed to have that weren't happening anywhere else. Conversations about our families, our work ethic, our silence, our struggles, our identity, our pain, and our pride. And 12 episodes later, aquí estamos. And today I want to bring it all home because everything this season, every episode about family pressure, emotional suppression, mental health stigma, the cost of assimilation, it's all been building toward this one question. What does it actually look like to be fully, wholly yourself when the world keeps demanding you to be the version of you that they think you ought to be? Ahora pues, let's talk. Let me start with something that I think a lot of us have felt but haven't had the words for. There's this pressure that bicultural Latinos carry. The dominant American culture says, hazte americano, fit in, assimilate, be less Latino, so that way we feel more comfortable. Y luego tenemos nuestras familias diciéndonos, no te olvides de dónde vienes. Don't become too American. Don't forget who you are. And what we do is we find ourselves standing in the middle of both, trying to figure out how to belong somewhere without completely disappearing. So what do a lot of us do? We split. We create two versions of ourselves, one for home and one for everywhere else. We learn to code switch so completely that we don't even notice when we're doing it. We compartmentalize. We keep our two selves separate and we never let them be in the same room. And that works for a while, pero también it has a cost. Recuerdo que una vez yo estaba sentado in a class at college cuando one of my classmates said out loud, all I want to do is live in part of a town where everybody only speaks English. And at that moment I realized, hey, she's talking about me. This chica who just stood up and talked, she would never be comfortable with me being her neighbor. Y no es porque yo hice algo. She simply wouldn't be comfortable having me as a neighbor simply because I'm me. Para decirte la verdad, that stung. And it wasn't because she yelled it, pero porque she said it casually, like it was perfectly reasonable, como si yo no estuviera allí. And I had to absorb that quietly in public with nowhere to put it. Y mira, those kind of moments accumulate. It's not always one big dramatic thing. It's 100 small moments from both sides, microaggressions that pile up over time and slowly convince you that the safest thing that you can do is to keep yourself divided. Keep the Latino version of you in one box and the American version in another, and never let them meet. Luego, déjame contarte de mi papá. My dad was American born, pero he was proud of his cultura and his language. And whenever I'd talk to him, he'd say, John, háblame en español. So I'd try. Pero pobrecito mi papá, estaba sordo. He was hard of hearing. And I talk fast. So sometimes he'd stop me and say, John, no te entiendo. Mejor háblame en inglés. So there I was trying to speak Spanish for my dad, switching to English when he couldn't follow, navigating both in the same conversation with the same person in real time. And that right there is bicultural experience exhibit A. Neither language was quite right. Neither version of me was quite enough. Y aún así, era mi papá. And I loved him, and I desired his approval. Let me tell you a little bit more about my identity. I too am American born. Both of my grandmothers were of Mexican and indigenous descent. And my grandfathers were both Spaniard and of Sephardic Jewish descent. And I didn't fully learn Spanish until I was an adult. I grew up in the 80s when Reagan was the president, and it was a time whenever the American dream felt real. And I was that little kid that said the Pledge of Allegiance every morning with genuine pride. I'm also the kid who grew up in the Hatch Valley working alongside immigrant workers in the summer heat, communicating the best that I could with the words that I knew. And to be honest, I still struggle to communicate. You've probably heard it as I've talked through this podcast. Honestly, I'm still a little all over the place. And I'm learning poco a poco to embrace all of who I am. But here's what I want to name because I think it's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. When you live divided too long, when you keep these two versions of yourself in separate boxes and you never let them meet, it does something to you. Thoughts start showing up. Thoughts like, I'll never be good enough. I'll never fully belong anywhere. No matter what I do, it's never going to be enough. And sometimes, whenever things get really heavy, thoughts go even darker than that. Thoughts that say, maybe they'd be better off without me. And I want to name those thoughts out loud because I know that some of you have had them. And I want you to know that these thoughts are not the truth. They are simply what happens when a person has been carrying too much for too long without enough support. They are a signal that something needs attention. They're not evidence that you are beyond help or beyond belonging. Sometimes it's not the thoughts, sometimes it's the body. You There you are going about your day, and suddenly something happens. There's a comment, a look, a moment that triggers all of the things that accumulate pressure, and your body reacts. It reacts before your brain has a chance to catch up. Your heart beats a little faster, your breathing changes, there's tension in your chest, or it feels like a gut punch in your stomach. And suddenly you feel like you either need to move or defend yourself, kind of like a giant is coming at you when the thing you're actually dealing with is the size of a chihuahua. Now, sometimes you can resolve that. Sometimes you can move through it, you can shake it off, but sometimes you can't. And sometimes you choose to not deal with it. Instead of moving through it, it just sits there. Y poco a poco, that unresolved overwhelm turns into something heavier, a deep exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, a sadness without a clear hope, a loss of hope that makes it hard to find a reason to engage with the world around you, a withdrawal from the people and the life around you. And that's what living divided te cuesta. So, what do we do with all of this? The first thing, and I this is something that I've been inviting you into all season long with the small practices at the end of each episode. It's learning to notice what's happening inside of you before you react to it, not analyzing it, not judging it, just noticing. When the pressure comes, when somebody says something that is triggering, that divided feeling, when the thoughts start showing up, when the body starts reacting, instead of immediately responding or immediately shutting down, try pausing, even for just a few seconds, and ask yourself, what am I noticing right now? Hmm, estoy notando tensión en mi cuerpo. Estoy notando el pensamiento que no soy suficiente. Estoy notando el impulso de decir algo que después voy a lamentar. Estoy notando el impulso de huirme. Just name it. Because here's what naming does, it gives your mind a chance to organize what is taking place. Naming it gives your mind a chance to organize what's happening inside of you before you act on it. It creates a small space between the trigger and the response. And in that space, you get to choose. And you don't have to respond to every thought. You don't have to act on every emotion. You don't have to give in to every urge. That space, pequeño pero poderoso, is where your freedom lives. Let me tell you about the moment whenever I understood what integration actually feels like in the body. I was 16 years old. I was in PE class, and there was this coach, a teacher, who had a habit of treating my Mexican classmates, immigrants, unfairly. And one day he started yelling at two girls in the class, demanding that they speak in English. These girls had only been in the country for a very short time. These girls were doing their very best in a place that was still so unfamiliar. And something in me in that moment snapped. I got on my feet, I got on his face, and I told him that he needed to treat them with respect. I caught him by surprise, and yeah, he sent me straight to the office. So I walked, not to the school office, but across the street to the superintendent's office, and I sat down and I told them everything. In that moment, I wasn't just the proud American kid who said the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. And I wasn't just the Latino kid from the Hatch Valley who understood what it felt like to be made to feel less than. I was both at the same time, in the same body, in the same moment. There was integration, not a theory, not a concept, just a 16-year-old kid who refused to keep his two worlds separate when it mattered most. That moment defined something in me. It said, I'm not going to let myself or the people around me get erased for who we are. And that decision, made at 16, in a PE class in New Mexico, is part of why the Entre Mundos Collective exists today. So here's what I want to leave you with as we close out season one. Integration doesn't mean you have no tension. It doesn't mean that both worlds suddenly get along. It doesn't mean that your familia stops having opinions or that the American culture will stop demanding your assimilation. It means you stop letting those two worlds run from separate boxes. It means that you take the time to notice the parts of yourself that you actually value, the ones that you want to keep, and the ones that you want to express, the ones that are yours. And you let those parts know each other. You let them talk to each other. You let them show up in the same room at the same time. And slowly, poco a poco, you build enough confidence to stand in front of your familia, your coworkers, your community, and you say, this is who I am. This is what you get. Poquito de todo. Ni de aquí ni de allá. Fully wholly me. Not perfect, not finished, not fully resolved, but whole. Y eso, that wholeness, Nobody gets to take away from you. Now, before I close out the season, I want to take a moment to talk to you directly about what the Entre Mundos Collective actually is and where it's going. This podcast started as my attempt to put to language experiences that bicultural Latinos carry but don't always have the word for. And 12 episodes later, I believe more than ever that these conversations matter, that naming what we carry is the first step toward not being buried by it. But Entre Mundos was never meant to just be a podcast. It was always meant to be a community, a space where bicultural Latinos can have the conversations that most of us won't have anywhere else. Conversations about our family, our identity, our pain, our pride, our roots, our becoming. And that community is growing. I'm currently making connections with other bicultural Latinos who are willing to share their own stories of navigating life entre mundos, their experiences, their tensions, their integration. Mira, your story matters too, not just mine. So here's my invitation to you as we close out season 1. Join the conversation, not just as a listener, but as a participant. Come and find me on Substack, where every Tuesday I go deeper into the topics that we discuss here. I'd love to hear from you in the comments there. And come and find me on Instagram and TikTok, where I post content and start conversations throughout the week. And join me on TikTok Live. I host weekly conversations where we talk all about this in real time. You can find me on all of these platforms under Entre Mundos Collective. This is where the plática really happens. Porque the collective isn't just my voice, it's ours. Season 2 is coming, and there's so much more that I want to talk to you about. Pero mientras, I want to leave you with this. Think about the 2 versions of yourself that you've been carrying. The one you bring to one world and the one you bring to the other. What would it feel like to let them be in the same room? Not to fix anything, not to choose one over the other, just to finally let them meet. Because you were never supposed to be one thing or the other. You're meant to be all of it. Poquito de todo, ni de aquí ni de allá, fully, wholly you. If this is something that you've experienced, know that you're not the only one. These are conversations that many of us have lived, but never have had the space to talk about. So if someone came to your mind while you were listening, compártelo. Send them this episode. Send them this season, porque sometimes hearing something said out loud can make a difference. Ahora sí, vecino. This has been season 1 of the Entre Mundos podcast. 12 episodes, 12 conversations that most bicultural Latinos don't get to have. And I'm grateful. I'm genuinely grateful that you have been part of this. And if you happen to have missed an episode, now is a perfect time to get caught up. Make sure also to leave a positive review for me on Apple, if you don't mind. And of course, don't forget to tell all of your vecinos about your favorite bicultural vecino who understands cultura y psychology. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of your people, and keep honoring your roots without losing yourself. Un abrazote fuerte. Hasta luego.